So growing up, I'd been really close with my grandfather, who we see in the top row here. And it's been 20 years since he passed. And this last October, I was just thinking about him and realized I knew nothing about his parents and nothing about his family. And so I reached out to kind of the last knowledge keeper of our family. I tried asking my mom, she knew nothing. She'd kind of really run away from her family in that sense and that history. And so I reached out to my cousin, and he sent me photographs, the very first photographs I've ever seen of my great-grandparents. And it was so amazing to kind of, well, just to finally see their faces. And yeah, and to finally, so it was amazing to finally see these photographs of my great-grandparents and to be able to try and relate to them. And so as an artist, the first thing I thought to do was to try and recreate and draw their faces. So we'll see probably in a minute, but that one drawing of Tatiana was just my way of trying to connect with her and try and say, yeah, you know, she's a part of me, but how? And how do I bring that to life? And so with these studies here, then I started talking to Connie, and Connie asked if, or archive, they asked if I could show, and so I just thought, well, that's great. I can put the focus towards that. I'm getting nervous again. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So with that, as soon as I had the focus for the show at Archive, I started doing these repetitions and these series of portraits. Again, as a way to explore who these people may have been and how their histories intertwine with mine. And so I think some of the interesting things that started to happen, like as I was repeating Tatiana, and I think I did maybe 15 drawings of her, just from the same photograph taken just before she immigrated with her 4 children on her own, is that just like how when you start to get to know someone, their features begin to change and they become different people while still being the same. And so that was kind of interesting for me to kind of get to know them in this sort of separate way. So I displayed them in these layers and kind of going upwards as a way to say, you know, how do we reach back to people that are no longer here? How do we reach back to when people are missing? How do we connect with them? And so that's where the ladder is here too, if you actually want to climb up and get closer, but just kind of thinking about that lineage. My mom also said something interesting today with the one up top. She said, oh, well, you knew them when you were a child, so you're always looking up at them. And I thought that was kind of interesting to think about why I put them up there and not in the bottom row. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then if we walk over here, I'll show you these pieces. These ones are really like ruminations of memory and moments that I spent with my Baba in particular. And so this one here, A Little Taste Before It Cools, is my Baba loved sugar, and so we'd always have Jell-O, and she would give me a little taste of it before it cooled, before she put it in the fridge. It was always so warm and delicious. So that's what this is, and I decided to put them in resin. We thought, oh, should I make a Jell-O? But I think the resin's kind of neat because it adds that layer of distance, right? And it is a memory now, and so by kind of laminating it in a sense, it freezes it in that moment too. This one is babka bread, and my Baba was a wonderful baker and cook, and so yeah, I wanted to try and connect with her by making some of the things that she used to. And so this was my 3rd round of the recipe. The first round took me about 6 hours. I knew nothing about bread, about rises, how to knead, nothing. So after a few phone calls and getting frustrated, I started getting it dialed down. And yeah, it's made in a tin can, and it gets the bulbous shape out. Mm-hmm. My favorite part about this recipe, actually, from this old book I was reading, is that it says once the babka bread is done and you pull it from the can, you're supposed to put it on a soft pillow. And I thought, what kind of bread needs a soft pillow to like be supported so it doesn't collapse on itself, I guess. So yeah, and yeah, it's a neat recipe. I guess it has links back to like when Ukraine was a matriarchal society, and there's an interesting history there. So this one, just like the Jello, I put these a bit higher, kind of at eye level, because that's how I remember coming up to the table, right, as a kid. Everything's there, and you're peeking over, and you're thinking, what are you dipping your donut in? So you can see there's the coffee in there, and it's called Two Sugars. And that's same with the plastic, so I think a few people might relate to the fact that these are covered in plastic, and I don't know if your grandparents, but cover everything in plastic, like lampshades and Chesterfields, so that's kind of trying to get you to have a visceral connection or memory of that. Continue this way. So this is the first drawing that I mentioned that I had done of Tatiana, my great-grandmother, when I first saw her photo. And so in Poland, her and her mother, they worked the land, and then when they came to Canada, they were also farmers. And so I wanted to kind of celebrate the idea of, how we think of soil and earth and what it may have meant to my family here. And so I put it on this silver platter. It belongs to my my grandmother on my dad's side, so don't tell her. But I did polish it before I did, so it's well taken care of, even though it has soil on it. So then down here, these are two paintings I did of Mikhail and Tatiana, my great-grandparents. And I left them unfinished like this because, again, it's thinking about how do people come alive from the past? How do we relate to them? What is it? They're not fully formed people in a way, right? Because they're in my blood, they're in my family's memory and history, but there's certainly gaps in knowing, right? So then down here. So this is a painting of my Baba, who I did know, and my Guido, who I did know also. And so they're a little bit more colored and textured. And so this was taken from a photo of Baba with me. And then this one's my grandfather. So Baba passed away about 10 years after my grandfather. And so in this one, it was the last painting I did, and I just thought, I really, really love color, but I think I chose to use some of these brighter colors as a way to almost kind of try and bring him back to life, in a sense. And I just told myself, we're spending time together, and this is our moment to just be, I think that was a big part of why I really loved putting this show together, was because it allowed me to have space in my life again to remember, to honor them, to acknowledge them, remember those little details or things that we would do together. So, and then here's another one of Baba with her babka bread, just the actual photo. She has the bread here. And then before you come back down the hallway, so this is the last piece here, and so this outline is representative of Tatiana's mother, whose name has been lost. We don't know what she looked like, anything. And so the flowers here, the roses, are kind of as a symbol of, laying them on the grave, or in remembrance of who she was, and just trying to honor that, because she did create all of us, right? And the story too is that she was assaulted in one of the wars in Poland, and then ostracized because of that. And so on her own, she gave birth to Tatiana, and then worked the land and grew from there. So just reflecting on that in my history too. And we're going to go to Poland this year, so I hope maybe we can find her grave, or we will see. And then so these last three are quite personal, but I kind of hope that in maybe their portrayal, you'll get maybe think of your own grandparents, or your own family. This is my grandparents' garden behind. And I just love this photo of them in love, because when I knew them, they were not so close. So I just love to kind of think, they did fall in love, right? And they did have that story, and this is the garden they made together. And I put these little pins in here. My Baba was also a seamstress, so that was reminiscent of that too. And my Baba had cut that out of the newspaper. There was a couple of them, and so I don't know, it felt good to put them in a frame, and to say, yeah, I still, maybe you're not in the paper, but we still think of you, often, and know that you're there. And then here's a photograph of Tatiana, so that's taken from her, like a passport photo sitting before she immigrated with the 4 children, and that's Mikolajau, the village that they're from in the background. Yeah. And that is it. That's the end here. I guess here the very last one is the, as you said, the matriarch, or the looking over the show, and yeah, so that was them when they were finally back together in Smoky Lake in Alberta together, again working the land. And if you peek around the corner, there's a little doll that says hi when you come in.